I looked up how to do these things on the internet last night, and it showed that your camera was right down by the end one, which is the way we're going. So I said to the lads, look, we're going right past, come on. The copy, it might take more than 15 minutes. I think we'll buy them, we'll go on our way, so they're all like, oh, so we go all the way down there, and we go all the way back. We've already had an amazing morning. Last night we were at the Hall City, and I'll run a thing called Jail Guitar Doors, which is a program to get acoustic guitars from prisons. So I've got a thing to all the prisons in the UK to use people to use guitars for work and rehabilitation. And we made a little documentary to show the full way of the ethics earlier this year. And people who came to the theatre raised quite a lot of money in Nottingham, HMP Nottingham prison, and today we went there delivering the guitars into the prison this morning bright and early, and I have to say they were good for a man in completely New York.
We've got a...
We're not? No, okay. I'm only joking. We were in there this morning, and the good thing is that it's such a nice day. We've got to get to Preston tonight. We've got a show tomorrow in Preston, but because the weather's so nice, my tour manager said that we could pop down and see, pop in and play around and give you some support. This isn't the first occupation I've been in. Last weekend I was at University of Nottingham, where the students there, as far as I know, are still holding out for the same reason that you're holding out. And I just really wanted to come down and say thank you for the stand you've taken. It's very, very important that your generation steps up, and the fact that you're the first people really to be involved directly in the front line of the struggle, rather than traditional leaders, people who mobilise opposition to government cuts. But it's been people like you, because I'm sure you're aware for the last 15 years probably, people from my generation have been moaning about how uncritical you are. I'll tell you something, we were buying Margaret Thatcher in 1985, 86, 87 with Red Wedge. Everybody said to us, you know, these students today, they're not nearly as good as they were in the 90s. People always said that. I'll tell you that. The next generation will look back at the stand you have taken, and they will be inspired. They'll see that you didn't sit there and let these cuts roll over, that you were willing to step up. And it's really, really cool. Because people like me, I didn't go to university or college. I left school when I was 16. I didn't study politics at all. Even into my, my late teens, early 20s. I wasn't what I would call really political. I was strongly opposed to racism. The first political thing I did was go and work in Western March. And I see the Clash playing in Victoria Park in Hackney in 1978. And that kind of gave me, a sort of broad humanistic politics that many of my generation share. But ultimately, it took situation like the one you find yourselves in, where someone stood in the way of my dreams and what I wanted to do and said, no further. That person was Margaret Thatcher. I was criticised by that. Used my great Jacob Barr, not Karl Marx, not Antonio Gramsci, not anybody, not Bob Dylan. It was Margaret Thatcher who politicised me. She politicised me because she said, that we're not going to have any more we're not going to have any more we're not going to sell capital. We're going to, not going to pay military pensions anymore. All the things I'd grown up to take for granted, all the things that I thought were just part of life, I assumed. Everyone went to school for free, everyone went to the doctors for free, everybody could get a university education grant for free. I didn't understand how our parents' generation fought hard to get that. They've been through an incredible cataclysm. They learned a lesson, the Second World War started and they started bombing our cities, the government declared that those people who went out into the streets during the raids, the air raid wardens and the firefighters, that they could have something revolutionary like freedom. Because they went out and lived, they could have freedom. Unlike the rest of the population. Then they said those people, those children who had been injured in the Blitz, they should have free healthcare as well. And then logically they said, well, the mothers of those children should have free healthcare. Slowly, under the pressure of war, under the realisation of that communal experience, because the bombs didn't fall on the poor people's houses, they fell on the rich people's houses, they fell on the poor people's houses, they fell on the old people's houses. They realised, this was, they really were, never mind bullshit like counter pictures, they really were oriented. So when the war ended, it had to be something more than just about beating the Germans. It had to mean something more. The sacrifices they had made. Many people remember the First World War were trying to end it as kind of stalemate. And people came out, and the entire generation got away from war. For nothing. And in 1945, there hadn't been a general election for 10 years because of the war and the depression. And what happened at that time was in 1928, women under the age of 30 were given the vote for the very first time. So it's an entire generation of young women, many of them young mothers, got to vote for the first time. What did they vote for? They voted for free education, free housing, free healthcare, proper pensions, all those things that my generation grew up taking for granted. It's what they bequeathed to us. And we struggled hard during the 1980s to make sure there was still some access to you. The crisis didn't manage with the house, we didn't manage to hold. We didn't really manage to keep hold of the pensions. We managed to keep hold of the health service and a lot of the free education. But it's constantly under threat, that country. I mean, I've just been in the United States of America, and the band that played with me last night from the United States of America, and they're in pieces because they voted for free healthcare, they haven't got it. And what the same thing we did, we woke up one morning and said, oh, let's have free healthcare. People struggled for decades to achieve free healthcare. They struggled for decades to achieve decent, affordable housing. They struggled for decades to have pensions and national insurance. And I tell you, they struggled for decades to have decent education all the way up to university level. That's the legacy that they passed on to my generation. That's the legacy that we inherited and we fought for against Thatcher in the 1980s. And the fact you are stepped up before everybody else, that you are in the front line, that you're the people who are going to fight this fight first, it's really, to me, it's really important. Because this is kind of a weird thing for us. You're the sort of first generation that can actually do politics without ideology. I personally think that's a good thing. I don't think you want to go back to that sectarian bollocks that we had to put up with in the 1980s, because there were some people in the 11th politics who had absolutely no doubts whatsoever. Never trust anyone like that. There are fundamentalist religious nutcases who will cross the earth. And I'm the one who has no sense of humour.
Just like you, man.
The point I want to make is that it's hard enough to struggle to fight off this increase in fees without also having to throw the capitalist system at the same time. That takes a little bit longer. And in the 80s, I had to learn on the job the language of Marx. I don't know shit about how so I said I didn't do anything. And I was sleeping on the floors of mining families, some in this part of the world, who wanted to know why I'm talking over the come work from London and coming up with a gig. I better be able to explain to them about my idea of what socialism is in their kind of language. But at that time, there was a Berlin Wall, there was a Soviet Union, China was a communist country rather than command country. The Labour Party was on the left, Conservative Party was on the right. We lived in incredibly ideological times, but at the end of the century, that's all fallen away, it's gone. And fucking good riddance to it. Good riddance to the Soviet Union, to the Berlin Wall, to Margaret Thatcher, to all the ways of